Welcome back everyone to the World Power to X Summit 2020. Just before the break, we had an interesting discussion on the Power to X opportunities in Africa. But now we will switch gears towards regulations and fundings that will be discussed by our dear panelists of the next session. And to share this discussion, I'm happy to introduce my dear colleague, Dr. Samir Rashidi. Dr. Samir Rashidi is an R&D director within IRISEN in charge of solar thermal system and Power to X. With his team, they are developing research projects and demonstration activities focusing on Power to X, green chemistry, energy storage, concentrated solar, and hybridization of renewable energies. Prior of his current position, Dr. Samir served as R&D program manager at Mazen. His role consisted in catalyzing national R&D efforts in the solar energy field, building international R&D project partnerships and collaborations in the area of solar application, as well helping strategic R&D orientation to help unleash a Moroccan industrial potential in the solar sector in the future. Mr. and Dr. Samir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Salma, for the nice introduction. Indeed, it's really an interesting and very crucial session dedicated to an element that is a key enabler of large-scale deployment of Power to X projects. So in this session, of course, the deployment of Power to X products is key to achieving the potential of a carbon-free world. This means that this energy revolution will have to be regulated in order to establish a viable Power to X economy. Furthermore, several countries have already started to develop their Power to X roadmaps and are being looking for means to invest in them. It is therefore essential to encourage and fund pilot programs related to Power to X technologies. So the expected outcome of this session will be to see what are the efforts that needs to be deployed in this aspect. We know that this is a very technical and important issue, and it's also very diverse. So we can speak about carbon taxes, fiscality, incentives, but also regulations and standards. And to tackle those questions, I'm really glad and honored to chair this session and to introduce the different panelists. Mr. Rabi El-Basha, first of all, President of CDEMA. Mr. Bintabush Ulrich, Deputy Director General in the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy of Federal Republic of Germany. Mr. Wolfgang Ersheimer, Head of Competence Center Energy Policy and Energy Markets, Fraunhofer EASY in Germany. And Mrs. Anne Lapierre, Global Head of Energy at Norton Rose Fulbright. And Mr. Gabriel Delastour, Associate Director and Regional Head in Energy in the EBRD. So first of all, I will give the floor to my friend and colleague, Mr. Rabi El-Basha, who is probably one of the youngest, if not the youngest, participants or speakers of this channel, but not, I mean, he's also very competent, and he's also an image of the Moroccan youth, how we can be young, but also very engaged towards this deployment of large-scale projects in our country. So Mr. Rabi El-Basha is the founder of the newly created CDEMA, Center for Comparative German and Moroccan Law. In collaboration with IRISEN, he produced a report on the legal regulation of hydrogen and fuel cells in Morocco and Germany. His experience within German structures in Morocco allowed him to contribute to the development of a Moroccan-German relationship, especially in the sector of energy efficiency via the regulation aspect. Mr. El-Basha, Rabi, the floor is yours.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Hello everyone, liebe Kollegen. With this intervention, I would like first of all to thank the Mohammed VI University and an outstanding Moroccan institutions, IRISEN. It's a real honor for me to be here today, and I'm personally convinced that German legal experience on hydrogens can be benefits to the future elaborations of Moroccan texts. So this intervention will try to demystify the basic rules of hydrogen production and will also focus on the storage, even though there are 6 fields of applications, as you can see in the display. And in Morocco and German law, it will be necessary to keep in mind that there can be no legal productions on site without hydrogen storage. The 2 fields of applications are intimately linked and many similarities will be found. So first of all, German buildings law requires that the industrial plans for the productions can only be, first of all, the German buildings law requires that industrial plans for the productions can only be built in industrial zones, and they must comply with the regional development plan, either provisional or definitive. In Morocco, we do not have a provisional, but only a definitive plan. And the constructions and operations of PTX systems in Germany requires an approval with public participations according to the paragraph 10 of the Federal Emissions Control Act. More precisely, an electrolyzer is therefore a system that requires public approval according to the section 4 of the Annex 1 of the 4th Ordinance of the Emissions Control Act, which specifies the framework for these installations. These types of procedures therefore includes the buildings permit and the environmental impact study, but for a centralized hydrogen production plan, a single construction and operating permit must be delivered. So in some German studies, the legal criticisms of these public participations is raised or was raised. Such a validations procedures involving the state, in particular for small and medium-sized PTX plants, might not be appropriated. We're thinking about the discussion that were about the Mainz Energy Park. Therefore, public participations could interfere with economies of scale. If such criticisms exist, it's because there is a difficulty in providing a legal definitions of the term industrial scale. So in addition to this permit, the approval of a PTX plans includes an environmental impact assessment, an EIA, and as you can see, the requirements are directly related to the storage quantities and are specified in Annex 1 of the UWPG, in German das Gesetz über die Umweltträglichkeitsprüfung, the Environmental Impact Assessment Act. And it's not only for new projects, but also for changes in plant capacity projects. So secondly, according to the risk and safety requirements, which are listed below, there are general requirements which are not specific to hydrogen, but will be applicable in the context of an industrial scale, such as the delimitations of ATEX zones, declarations of conformity or CE markings, and some specific rules will apply for storage capacities of 50 tons or more, for example, the nominations of an accident control officer, who may also have the role of an emissions control officer. So if we take a look about the Moroccan aspects, within the meaning of the dispositions of Article 4 of the Moroccan Law on Renewable Energy, a preliminary declaration is required for electrolysis projects on site. It's the legal possibility to produce green hydrogens, even though the text does not legally stipulate the term electrolysis. Like German law, which is a public participation approval, which will require an administrative and technical file on the electrolysis technologies used on site. The decree of this law defines the procedures for obtaining provisional and definitive authorizations, and more precisely, the Royal Decree of 1914, as amended, the Daher, contains the elements for the operations of dangerous installations. And the manufacture of hydrogens is registered as a Class 2 establishment. So, in contrast to Germany, there is no legal text dedicated exclusively to the regulations of energy storage in Morocco. According to the first article of the decree number 541, the implementations of the strategic storage policy depends directly on the attributions of the energy and mines departments of the supervisory ministry. But as in German law, Moroccan PTX projects with public participations will require an EIA. And secondly, with regards to the safety and risk requirements, Morocco has a real legal and huge arsenal, either by regulatory decrees, convention ratified, and Morocco ISO standards developed on international basis. So for the last slide, you have here the main steps in the approval process, which are presented for both countries. And in a surprising way, there is a lot of similarity. In both countries, step 3 is important because the project is communicated to the general public while respecting confidential data. In this sense, civil objections can be raised after the conception deadline, precisely in Germany 2 weeks after the conception deadline. And to finish about the German aspects in the general process, the responsible authorities vary from state to state. But what is important to know is that the earlier the authority is informed, the better it can exercise its advisory function, which is provided by the 9th German Ordinance on the control of emissions. Thanks for your attention.
Mr. Rabi El-Basha, for this interesting insight on really a comparison between the Moroccan and German legal context. And without no further ado, I would love to introduce Mr. Ulish Bintarbush. Mr. Bintarbush is the Deputy Director General of the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. Prior to that, he assumed positions in the Economic Affairs Ministry, the Federal Chancellery, and the International Energy Agency, IEA, in Paris, as also a director of the DENA, the German Energy Agency. His portfolio includes energy efficiency in industry and households, as well as sustainable mobility. Dear Mr. Bintarbush, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
For that, are you hearing me now?
Yes, now yes, go ahead.
Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Rashidi. There are some repercussions, right?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. If we look at the question of regulation and the question of power to hydrogen, then of course we will also need to look at a broad range of regulations. And I will do this now in particular first with a view to how we in Germany can develop hydrogen and a hydrogen market, and what we are doing now after having to implement the hydrogen strategy that the government has agreed on in June of this year. And of course, in many aspects, this all depends on the cost issue and has to do with the cost issue. So as regards big framework conditions, we of course, you have mentioned this question of CO2 taxes. And yes, there will be a very slight support on this front because Germany has and will introduce in this year also a CO2 tax in the sectors of transport and heat and industry. So that means that not only the energy intensive industries that fall under this regulation, emission trading system under the EU regulation are now concerned, but also all industrial activities and the transport sector, but with a very modest begin. We are talking here about 20-25 euros per ton CO2, but that will scale up to a significant amount at the end of this decade. In addition, I would like to say at the outset to put the perspective right, when we are talking about hydrogen, it is very clear to us that the energy transition in Germany and the decarbonization on our way to climate neutrality in 2020, not only green electricity, but a prerequisite in addition is green molecules, hydrogen and its derivatives. So that is a very firm insight and further development, so to speak, to our energy transition concept of the year 2010-2011. because it was already very, let's say, sophisticated, in particular with regard to efficiency, renewable energies, in particular electricity, of course, and other renewable sources. But the missing link was the question of hydrogen, because it is absolutely clear to us that without hydrogen, climate neutrality, in particular with regard to transport, industry like chemistry or steel, we can never achieve. And if you look to the German energy structure today, it is also absolutely apparent that we import today more than 85% of our energies. And that is to say that even if our energy dependence via renewable electricity may decrease a bit, the idea that the German economy can decarbonize at a level of carbon neutrality without massive imports of green electricity, in particular green molecules, that is a fairy tale. And therefore we are very keen now to speed things up and develop with our partners international supply chains for hydrogen and its derivatives. Now let me come back to the question of regulation and framework conditions. In terms of cost, one big issue in our country is the so-called EEG surcharge. So the surcharge that we put on renewable electricity. And we have agreed in our strategy that we will take off this surcharge from the production of green hydrogen, so that this cost element is no longer blocking the development. And we are currently introducing this legislation. In addition, that is a very important aspect, we need to define what is green electricity. And when an electrolyzer takes the electricity out of the grid, and it's maybe up north, and the production site is south, then we have to make sure that it's really green electricity that the electrolyzer is using. That is a regulation that the European Commission is currently preparing and where we are also developing our position. But the definition of what is green electricity in conjunction with the production of green hydrogen is a must, because we have to make sure that if we speed up the production of electrolyzers, that we obey to this principle of additionality of green electricity to be used for the production of hydrogen. Because if we don't do that, then we increase consumption of electricity, and at the end of the merit order, we may find additional brown coal capacity to enter the electricity market, increasing our CO2 emissions. So that is something one has to take into account very, very carefully. Now, in terms of regulations, there is another important piece of legislation now on our table. And just this morning, we had this dossier on Vice Minister's level, which is the Renewable Energy Directive 2 from European level, which we have to implement now. And here we are talking about the renewable energy quotas for the transport sector. And our aim is to have a very ambitious renewable energy quota for 2030 in order also to allow green hydrogen to play a big role in the transport sector in the future, be it via synthetic fuels, be it via kerosene on a synthetic basis, or be it directly hydrogen into heavy duty vehicles, for example, or, and that is the most important first step, replacing gray hydrogen in refineries via green hydrogen, and then that amounts in Germany, if we have that regulation working, to a capacity of 2 gigawatts in the next, let's say, 10 years to come, starting, let's say, next year with planning, and then final investment decision, hopefully in 22 or 23. But this is a regulation that puts the cost that we will need for green hydrogen in refineries to the consumer in the transport sector. So we all will pay at the fuel station for this additional cost. and it will amount in Germany roughly to 1 cent per liter of gasoline and diesel. So it's in the end not a big thing. But this will help hopefully to speed up development on a national basis, because we need to have more experience, of course, in producing larger scale electrolyzers. So, another very important area of regulation is the infrastructure, where we will, of course, develop now a new set of rules that will be through Parliament, hopefully summer next year. But we have to make sure that, for example, companies who want to invest in respective hydrogen projects and need to transport hydrogen can use pipelines like those that we have today for natural gas, and if there is no need for them anymore, or that they can switch to others and free them up, that we have a system that ensures that this is legally safe and can work, and that those who want to consume green hydrogen and those that want to produce green hydrogen have an infrastructure option via pipeline. Now, when it comes to the international area, I just want to highlight at the end of my short introduction a couple of things. Of course, certificates and standards and guarantees of origin, certificates of origin are of course a must, because we cannot of course accept and sell let's say synthetic fuels or green hydrogen on the European or German market without being sure that strict environmental standards are followed. I think that's clear, and that is something we need to develop jointly. I'm happy that IRENA is also taking this dossier up, which I think they are very well placed to do. We are sure that what we will develop in terms of definition of green energy and green electricity at European level will also play a big role internationally. And that is why we also want to, develop this as fast as we can at European level in order to be able to have a good impact on the global discussion, because we are absolutely convinced that Germany has to import large quantities of renewable energy, and in particular green molecules in the future. And therefore, I would also like to thank the organizers for this wonderful conference, this Power-to-X Summit. And we appreciate very, very much Morocco's interest in this area and its engagement. And of course, we are also looking very much forward to an increased cooperation in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bestenbusch, for this really insightful presentation or talk from the German point of view, really insisting on what are the key elements that needs to be regulated when we are in the perspective of deploying large-scale PTX project. Thank you very much for this. And time now to move to Professor Dr. Wolfgang Ersheimer, who is the head of competence of the Center Energy Policy and Energy Markets at Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation. EASY, Fraunhofer EASY. He is also a professor for energy efficiency and energy systems modeling at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, Copernicus Institute of the Sustainable Development. And Professor Ersheimer is a physicist with professional experience gathered in various countries of the European Union and worldwide in designing and evaluating energy efficiency and renewables policies, as well as climate policies. Professor Ersheimer is very knowledgeable in Morocco, especially to the ecosystem of renewable energy. Because he is author of a study, or the first study that has been done with the support of GIZ Parema, on Power-to-X in Morocco and the potential of the country. And also work on the role of the hydrogen economy in the transformation of the energy system towards the climate neutrality. And he's just finished a paper on this subject, and we are really proud to be first stage to have the opportunity to have access to this paper. Thank you very much, Professor Ersheimer, for this honor. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. I hope you can hear me well. Perfect. And I think the slides can also be seen in a good manner. Thank you very much.
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to briefly introduce here, as the time is very short, our most recent work about the broader regulatory frame for the hydrogen economy, entitled here Opportunities and Challenges when Importing Green Hydrogen and Synthesis Products. And the aim of this policy work is to show the broadness of the techno-economic issues on one hand, but on the regulatory frame on the other hand, as my previous speaker has already worked out in quite some detail. And so we hope to contribute with this work to comprehensively accompany the path to the import of green hydrogen for the transformation of the energy system, well, in Germany, Europe, but also in countries with which to cooperate. I will only give you a brief view on the broadness of the frame, the regulatory frame, which is dealt with in this paper. And Mr. Benterbusch has fortunately already elaborated on quite some important aspects here. I have grouped here the issues into three parts, regulatory issues which are relevant for the state, for the industry, and on the next slide, for the society. And building on what Mr. Benterbusch has said previously, yes, climate neutrality requires the development of the hydrogen economy, but it needs to be accompanied. And in our paper, we present notably also the governance structures, the overall governance structures of the transformation of the energy system and how the evolving hydrogen economy fits into that system. And as Mr. Benterbusch has worked out, there is a clear priority needed on one hand for the energy efficiency first principle in combination with the hydrogen economy, because we all know that we have losses in the conversion chains to produce the hydrogen, to produce downstream products. And we need to compensate for that by pushing forward and very strongly the energy efficiency first principle, which has been developed in the European Union. And the second important point here, I cannot elaborate in all broadness, was also touched upon by Mr. Benterbusch and also in a number of previous sessions, how to assure that the decarbonization of the electricity system is happening in parallel to the development of the hydrogen economy. Mr. Benterbusch pointed out if we set up on one hand coal-based electricity generation in countries that produce hydrogen, for example, for Europe, I'm quite convinced that this would be a very difficult topic. So we need to assure that this fits. There has been a lot of discussion about certifications, but it's also important that in particular producing countries develop a 2050 frame for their own transformation of the energy system and for the possible use and exports of hydrogen and derived products. I cannot elaborate more on that here. Further issues to be developed are the import dependencies that we have to look on. And we have a new debate about technology sovereignty. I will briefly touch upon that on the following slide, hopefully. Then we have all the regulatory frame, which is relevant for the industries, about the market, the price building for hydrogen, and about how to organize incentive systems, in particular, as long as hydrogen technologies are too expensive yet. And finally, the third block, only briefly touching upon where regulatory issues are important, the sustainability criteria in the development of the hydrogen economy are important, but also how to integrate the economy, the arising economy in the international cooperation. And I'm very happy that this conference makes contributions to develop ideas on this between Europe and Morocco and other countries in Africa, notably. As said, I cannot elaborate in detail on this. Concerning incentives systems, very brief remarks. Our model-based investigations show that hydrogen and synthetic energy carriers, under a number of assumptions, can be economic between 2030 and 2040. And the emission trading scheme, the European emission trading scheme, will certainly contribute to that. 25 euro per tons of CO2 at present. The prices will rise, but they may not rise fastly enough to help the hydrogen economy to be competitive already right now. And we should start entering the hydrogen economy now already in order to be ready for 2050 for the role it needs. And here there are instruments I can only briefly touch, but maybe we come back to the discussion. There are, for example, at European level, discussions around so-called climate protection contracts or carbon contracts for difference. There are also projects for common European interest that can help to promote hydrogen projects. And at the European Union level, there is the European Innovation Fund, Decarbonization Fund in Germany, which helps to promote innovative hydrogen technologies. A quick final word about, this is a perspective of the importing, but also of the exporting countries for hydrogen. We have a lot of debate about technology sovereignty, and here I'm just putting a headline: Europe, China, battle for global supremacy on electrolyzer manufacturing. So this is clearly also an industrial issue, and it has three components which are important to consider. On the one hand, the availability of the technologies that are needed to build the hydrogen economy, the reliability of the imports from the exporting countries, but also the assessment of the technological sovereignty for the producing countries. So these three aspects are important to consider. As time is running out, I thank you very much for your attention, and you have seen this broad range of issues that need to be coped with in the regulatory frame for the hydrogen economy. You get here the links that will be active in a few days to the study which we have been producing here. And I'm very glad and very happy to be able to participate here to the summit in Morocco. And let me congratulate you for this very nice event and for the broadness of issues that you are presenting here and discussing in a very excellent manner. Thanks a lot. Shukran.
Thank you very much for those nice words, Professor Dr. Wolfgang Kirchhammer, and thank you very much for those insights that you have given from your side as an expert and a researcher in this area. Time now to give the floor to and also another knowledgeable figure in this field in Morocco, Mrs. Anne Lapierre. So Mrs. Anne Lapierre is acting as a global head of energy at Norton Rose Fulbright, which is a global law firm. Mrs. Lapierre is involved in many energy transactions related to both renewables and conventional production. She acts predominantly in project development, construction, financing, acquisition, and transfer of projects in the energy sector. She is acknowledged as a recognized leader and expert in the field. She has been member of France Énergie Éolienne's board of directors for more than 10 years. And she is also appointed, she was appointed in 2017 in the strategic committee as a sustainable development expert of Bernard Picard's Solar Impulse Foundation. Mrs. Lapierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I am totally excited about the new market opening for Morocco and the huge opportunity that is in front of Morocco in terms of development of hydrogen. Why is so? It's because Morocco has already evidenced for the past 10 years its amazing capacity to run out big projects in a short period of time. And in the renewable sector, I don't know whether you're seeing my screen now. Sorry.
Yes, we are able to. Just go ahead.
We see your slides.
Okay. No, c'est pas bon. Sorry, so I will do without my slides, and if I can move it, it doesn't matter. So the challenge is huge because, as was mentioned earlier in this presentation, the legal framework is very complex. We need to deal with transport, storage, production of energy, production of hydrogen, and in that regard, it is very, very important that there is an attractive and simple legal framework which is put in place. We have seen how complex is the system in Germany, and probably if all of those countries we see on the screen which have launched their roadmap want to actually develop attractiveness for investment and to really roll out adequately their hydrogen roadmap, they will need to consider to go for a simple, easy to handle regulatory framework. The development can only happen if the regulatory framework is in place. We need the support of the government, and all of these countries need to work together in order to create a global market. But at the same time, they're all in competition to attract investment. So the question is, how do you secure a long-term vision in order to actually ensure you've got some attraction? What has been done between Germany and Morocco is key, and we need a multiplication of the regional partnership and multilateral coordination to accelerate the development of green hydrogen in order to actually reach the hydrogen economic development, which is necessary to tackle the climate change issue. The EU Green Deal is a key pillar in all of that. We will need to see how we can roll that out. That was mentioned in a previous presentation. I think in order to make the EU Green Deal a success, it probably will be useful to actually think about what is going to be the certification and the taxonomy, and also how can the developing country can access to the support and development plan and financial capacity which is made available to develop the hydrogen economy. So we need a lot of coordinated initiative. The first thing, I think, it's a long-term strategy, and we say that it's with clear objective. We know that the usage of hydrogen are numerous. We need to clarify what we want to do first. Do we want to develop domestic? Do we want to develop export? Do we want to develop both? And do we want to produce hydrogen, or are we more looking for ammonia? So there is all of these questions which need to be addressed to ensure that the legal framework is actually supporting the objective, which needs to be set very clearly, but also with very clear intermediaries milestones. We need to ensure that the government can navigate the development with a clear ramp up, and ensure that if something is falling aside or is developing too slowly, then there is a catch-up possible to reach the ultimate objective. So the regulatory framework is going to be key. If there is no attractive regulatory framework, there will be no development, because as we know, the economics are not there, so government support is a must-have. And in order to do that, we really need to attract the commercial lenders, which means that the legal framework needs to be clear, long-term view, and securing for the private money to actually be invested into the sector. But obviously, in order to start this development, we will need to have government support schemes or subsidies in order to ensure that the first pilot projects are actually financed, probably with financial guarantee mechanisms, because there is a testing period which probably will not be attractive for the standard commercial lenders, I would say. As it is the case for OCP, we obviously need to have very, very strong investors and industry players off-taking on a long-term basis the products which are being produced. And obviously those players need to have solid balance sheets in order to give some security and long-term view for those projects. So a lot of things needs to be done. A lot of regulations need to be adopted. I think what is mandatory in order for a quick development and successful development to happen is that it absolutely needs to be coordinated, simple, and complete in order to give visibility to the investors. So from a legal standpoint, we've got a lot of things which needs to be tackled. I will not go through all of those items you see on the slides. I will just obviously mention what has already been said, but certification is absolutely key for that market to develop. So that's probably a pillar which needs to be worked on as a priority in all of the regulatory framework. It is very important to take the time to think about how you want to set up the framework and to define the attractiveness. This is the example of the UK, and what we can see from the expertise we've got from elsewhere is that the commercial design of project is entirely driven by the regulatory constraints. So the interface risk, where the support is coming from and so on, all of that is going to actually really be defining how the projects are going to be developed. So the regulatory framework needs really to be adjusted as you know, and fit for purpose in light of the strategy which will be developed. We've got an example from Australia. As you know, there is this very ambitious program which has been developed, and that's 26 gigawatt of renewable generation, desal plant, 14 gigawatt of electrolysis. So here we see a regional initiative, which is probably very interesting to look at. We've got the chance to work on this project and to see how the legal and the regulatory framework is impacting on the development of this mega project, and there is probably lessons to learn from that. But again, the success of development will definitely come by reviewing the legal framework, adjusting a dedicated hydrogen set of rules, and put in place financial support which allow for the development. And I'm totally convinced that in light of what Morocco has done with the development of renewable energy through Mazen in the past 10 years, all the innovation, all that success, there is obviously you know, an open future for the hydrogen development in Morocco. So that will come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lapierre, for this very interesting presentation and really holistic overview on the regulation aspects in all over the world. And now it's time to introduce our last speaker, Mr. Gabriel de Lastour. Mr. de Lastour is responsible for developing in the EBRD's power and renewable portfolio in the southern and eastern Mediterranean region, CEMED. This includes structuring debt and equity investment, as well as leading policy dialogue initiatives with governments in the region. Gabriel has worked in the EBRD's energy sector across Eastern Europe, the CIT, and CEMED for 13 years. First on a variety of the oil and gas and mining financing, and for the last 2.5 years on power and renewable energy projects in CEMED. Mr. de Lastour, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Thank you very much for having me. I will share some slides with you. So first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for the presentation. So I don't need to present myself, but I'd like to maybe share a few some views on what how we see at EBRD the question of regulations and funding for hydrogen. So first of all, you'll see on the left this bar chart, which presents a bit the aspirations. The Energy Transition Commission says that hydrogen, the aspiration is that hydrogen covers between 15 and 20% of final energy in the net zero economy globally by 2050. And so the question for us today, I guess, is what regulation is needed and what funding incentives can governments develop to support the expansion of hydrogen and this objective. Hydrogen, as you can see in the chart, is intended to have multiple uses, but essentially, I think where there will be scale is in as an industrial feedstock to decarbonize the energy intensive industries, such as fertilizer, chemicals, refineries, steel, long distance transport, which cannot be easily electrified. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see a few ideas and what EBRD as an international financial institution can offer. We have EBRD in our latest energy sector strategy. Also in our new green economy transition policy, which was approved 2 months ago, a number of priorities which are in line with these with the hydrogen agenda. EBRD, we believe especially that we have a role in supporting development of markets, of regulations to unlock the investments in hydrogen, but also financing the scale up in the first phase of the rollout of hydrogen. There will need to be some financing from development banks, from climate funds to really kickstart the financing before hydrogen reaches scale and industrial level where it becomes very competitive. And of course, we are thinking of the precedent of the solar power, of the wind power, which in the first years needed a lot of support and subsidies to kickstart. But today, we have a very mature industry which doesn't need support anymore. And so this is definitely a precedent which we think can be applied to hydrogen. There is also the European Union's hydrogen strategy, which gives a priority to renewable hydrogen produced with renewable energy. The roadmap for 2050 is to have 6 gigawatt of electrolyzer by 2025 and 40 gigawatt by 2030. The 2030 investment plan of the presented in the European hydrogen strategy is to have between 220 and 340 billion euros invested in renewable energy for hydrogen, 24 to 42 billion for electrolyzers, 11 billion for carbon capture and storage, and 65 billion for transport. So it's a very ambitious roadmap, which includes financing, and with the idea that you need to kickstart the sector and the hydrogen value chain and supply chain with some financial support so that it can, before it can reach scale at an industrial level. So maybe one more point is, how does this apply to Morocco and the wider region, the southern Mediterranean region? The EU has plans to include the southern neighborhood in the scope of this very ambitious roadmap. And of course, EBRD is very active in the region, very ambitious also in terms of financing. Finally, there's also the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, which is a key talking shop for coordination between stakeholders, and this will be an important also area. So I will go to the next slide. One more point on regulation is that the way we see the evolution of hydrogen is that it will start, it will not be applied as quickly in all the sectors. And I think maybe the last sector which will need to have a large scale application of hydrogen will be the transportation and aviation sector, because there are still some technological and industrial challenges to this area. So I think this is, of course, something we've based on a general consensus, but I'm sure my colleagues on the panel may have some on if this is the right timetable. But the point I want to make here is that there will be different phases in the expansion of hydrogen in the different sectors, and depending on the phases, there will be a need for different regulatory incentives and financial incentives to allow for the scale up of hydrogen. So one of and I think there are two big questions. The first one is to which extent the industrialization, the first phase, the phase one, the early movers need to be supported with financing. In Morocco, in the region, these financing will come from international development banks, development institutions, climate finance, such as the Green Climate Fund, which has already provided some financing in Morocco for in other areas, and other such funds, which will be critical in our view to really allow for the expansion, a quick expansion of hydrogen, with a support to R&D, which is with a support to the early movers, the investors in the area, etc. The second phase, the phase 2 and phase 3, will see a different need of regulation and financing. That could include, and that is roughly speaking, if you can see the different bullet points on my slide, is the idea that you need to put a cost on carbon. So you need to put a cost on the current high emission systems which are in place, to create incentives to replace fossil fuel energy with hydrogen. You also need to, it's likely that there will be restrictions on emissions. So maybe this is a complement to what Anne was saying on what are the right regulations to allow for the investment. Here I'm talking about what are the right regulations to incentivize the industrial consumers to switch to hydrogen. If there is a financial incentive thanks to regulation, to a carbon price, which is imposed, a carbon tax maybe, which is imposed on the polluting industries, then there will be a strong economic rationale for these private sector players to to switch to hydrogen. And this is one of the areas we think is needed. I'm going to switch to the next slide. Finally, what can EBRD as a development bank do in this area? I think that EBRD is very often thought only as a provider of loans, of financing, but we also have very extensive activities in helping governments develop regulation, develop incentives, and also in mobilizing climate funds and implementing the spending on the climate fund. We also have a regional perspective. We are in a number of worldwide organizations. I mentioned the Clean Hydrogen Alliance. And so we have a role to play to try to push for these different regulations and maybe help the Moroccan government, but also other governments in the region, adopt what is the best in class regulation and incentives which are done elsewhere in the world with some technical assistance and with some engagements. So that's from me today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. de Lastour, for this really interesting presentation, especially the slide where you have suggested a sort of a roadmap for the implementation of a regulatory framework. This is really impressive. I haven't seen this before, and I thank you for this. And this really completes the view that we have in this really outstanding panel. And let me please start with a question, provocative on purpose. And it's also related to the slide on the timeline that was suggested by Mr. de Lastour. And the question for all the panelists, if they would like to answer it, is it really urgent to regulate? I mean, so when we discuss with some industries and private sector actors, they would prefer to let first this newly born industry to being deployed at intermediate size, or what we call in Germany the Reallabor or reference industry reference projects. So probably if we regulate too early, it will block the deployment of such a sector. What's your opinion on this? A question to all the panelists, whatever your.
Maybe I start because I'm from government with your permission. Because I want to kind of break it down to a point where Anne has made a very strong point. That is, in the end, projects need to be bankable. And not all the finance can come from governments if we want to really have speed up development for green hydrogen and hydrogen economy. And therefore, we need, via regulation, of course, to cut cost down. And there are different elements via regulation where you can have an impact on cost. There was also one slide where somebody showed, how it works in UK in the transport sector and what they kind of have on their mind. This is very much inspired by European legislation in conjunction with the implementation of the Renewable Energy Directive 2. And that is where I would like to, point out that these things are essential in order to get the market driven. Because since costs are too high for green hydrogen, the private sector will not invest without the right framework conditions, be it in terms of legal regulation, be it in terms of support schemes. And we have discovered this in the German context very clearly when we said to ourselves, or asked ourselves the question, what kind of projects do we want to support now, since the government has made available for national projects and European projects, 7 billion euros, which is not pocket money, I would say, it's a very substantial amount. But we cannot simply say, okay, we support now the production of green hydrogen, because if there is somebody who produces green hydrogen, it needs to be used somewhere and it needs to be transported. So we need integrated projects. And when it comes to, a CapEx support for the electrolyzer, maybe CapEx support for infrastructure to start with. Of course, users have to pay, but it will not be sufficient for the infrastructure development in the first phase. And then you have the use in the sector, and then you are talking about OPEX, because OPEX will also have to be supported once you have this kind of project where you really fuel the development via support schemes. And when it comes to OPEX support, you quickly are talking here about, at least in the German economy, if it's, let's say, 100 megawatt electrolyzers over 10 years, about sums 200, 300 million euros. So this is not pocket money as well. And 7 billion, in comparison to what I've just said, is a relatively small sum if you take governments into account that divide such a sum for the support schemes on different ministries like environment, transport, economy, and research and development. So I clearly would like to make a point. We need intelligent regulation, in particular to get the project bankable. And I want to finish my contribution by saying we also think at this point in time about guarantees for banks that give credits, because the first movers in industry will have a lot of insecurity, and we have the impression that a normal commercial bank, even our KfW, will not be prepared to finance these projects because of lack of, bankability.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bush, for this answer. That also gives the floor to another questions. I know that we are a bit late on the schedule, but I have asked kindly my colleague Selma to leave me some more space to ask other speakers. But I will just change the question slightly, probably to Professor Dr. Wolfgang and Mr. de Lastour, on their insights on how they see effectively, as Mr. Bush said, the complexity of regulating within an international or multilateral configuration, because now it's not like the old or traditional configuration of renewable power plants, where are both the producer and the off-taker are in one country. And as you have mentioned, all of you, this is an international value chain. So how do you see this complexity of an international supply chain to be regulated, especially for the first pilot projects and industrial reference projects?
If I may start, thank you very much for this question. I would like to point to the fact that indeed we need to consider producing countries and the countries who are in demand for hydrogen. And as we just had discussion, maybe also reaction to Mr. Lastour's roadmap, I would see the necessity for having a regulation concerning, in particular, the sectors where we go forward with the hydrogen economy. And I would not share, for example, the view that hydrogen is something which we should use extensively, for example, in buildings, or which we should use extensively for private car transport. Clearly we need to focus our development in an early stage and provide a frame that the hydrogen economy can develop in those sectors where it's most important, I was a bit embarrassed to see in Gabriel's slide that air transport was coming so late, while I agree totally that industry and production are important. Air transport is an important part of the transportation sector, which should also be tackled. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Ershaima, for this answer, and also for, pointing out the importance of the aircraft industry, and probably that it can happen a little bit before in terms of timelines. Now, I would like to ask the same question to Mr. Delastour. What's your vision on this complexity of multilateral projects, both on funding and regulation point of view?
Let me now take my different hat as a bank, as a financier, and project finance, a bank on the project. I think that if we're looking at hydrogen produced with renewables, and let's take the example of a solar PV, which I think is probably the most relevant for Morocco, given the very good solar resources and the industry, solar industry, which is well developed already in the country. Well, from an investor's perspective, you will need to have the investor will need to have some comfort that there is a buyer for this hydrogen. So a number of questions are raised. The first one is in what type, how will the product be be produced? Would it be a commodity that can be transported and exported like ammonia? Would it be just a hydrogen gas? So there's one technical question which is asked, and the technical question will depend the answer on how to sell the product. I think, but from an investor's perspective, what we will look at from a bank financing these projects is that there needs to be a clear visibility on how the hydrogen will be acquired, and a financial certainty on what will be the return on on selling this hydrogen. So that means that there may need to be a government intermediary to buy the product and then organize the export, or there may need to be an integrated offer which includes both the PV plant, the hydrogen production, the transportation part, and then selling on the international market. And so that means it may need to be an integrated power company that would manage the project. So these are two different options, I think, to allow for these projects to be developed, get financing, and also have this, what you call multilateral, I would say, international aspects. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delastour, for this insightful response. And now I have just two questions, please, Selma, to our two last speakers. So my first question will go to Mr. Rabi El-Basha. And in an export perspective, through Maritime, for example, as a young association on legal issues between Morocco and Germany, what is your perspective in the legal framework that we need to work on?
Thank you for the questions. We have the International Maritime Organization, which is in the front line when we're talking about the International Maritime Framework, and more precisely the maritime safety commitments that leads the CCC departments, the carriage of cargoes and containers. And we have 2 points. Firstly, the EMDG codes gives requirements for compressed hydrogens and refrigerated liquid hydrogens that are comparable to those for compressed natural gas and refrigerated liquid natural gas. And the EMDG codes cover hydrogens and other dangerous goods as packaged cargo. The second point is the EGC codes, who does not contain specific requirements for the carriage on boats of hydrogens in bulk or as in packaged cargo. This is why there was 2 amendments that were adopted by the Maritime Safety Commitment, by the first resolutions in 2014 and the second one in 2016. And these recommendations have been developed on the basis of the hypothesis that a carrier of liquefied hydrogen does not transport liquefied gases other than liquefied hydrogens. And all of these rules are really important because they apply to Morocco. And in Europe, we have the Seveso directive, which is crucial, which concerns the major risk accidents and applies both, to the approval of refining, to the landing facilities, and also to the transport of hydrogens on board. More precisely, the Annex 1 of this directive establishes hydrogens as a dangerous substance and lists the applicable regulations according to the quantities. So this is the main aspect, I think, if you want to expose the hydrogens, but about the taxes, I will not pronounce myself. I'm not having the skills about that, but really quickly, if I'm able, we was talking about the economic attractiveness in the previous presentations with the High Hammer and Frau Lapierre. And this is really important because Morocco, Brazil, Algeria have made these mistakes in the past. And there is now really a hope and ambitions because Morocco has made a jump in the doing business ranking, World Ranking 2020, with some reforms have improved protections of minority investors and also the principle of transparency and good governance based on international standards. And also we can also talk about the taxes. They are now more progressive, better adapted, and there is a digitalization of the legal functions. And all these points are included in the business legal environment, which is important to attract the future investments. And you were talking about to make laws too früh, really in the first time. There is a French sentence which says "faut légiférer avant de trembler," which means we should be scared before to put some new laws. But it is important to have definitions on biogas. It is important to have definitions about cogenerations, combined cycle, all these important elements to really increase the investments in Morocco. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Rabia Basha, for these insights from CDMA. And now, last but not least, I would like to ask Mrs. Lapierre how you see, both from funding and regulation point of view, the way or the shortcuts to take to help scale up this industry and also the export perspectives.
Well, I think there are two key elements here. I think from a regulatory standpoint, apart from the fact that, as has already been said, support needs to be there long-term with visibility. In the implementation, I think it's going to be key to organize cooperation among the various stakeholders, and in particular at the government level, because obviously the project we're talking about involves the Minister of Industry, of Energy, of Environment, of Finance. So it's very, very important that there is a very strong cooperation, fluid cooperation from a government side, and from an investor side, that probably there is one-stop shop, or at least a commission, a body, which is probably dedicated to discuss all of the hydrogen development with them and to deal with their questions, and then to have the dispatch. Otherwise, it could be very, very long and difficult to actually go through all the permitting and financing process. From a financing standpoint, that's a key element, and it's probably, and that has been mentioned, probably one of the route is probably to think about creating a guarantee. If we look at the way Morocco has developed its solar project for the past 10 years, that was very creative from a financing standpoint, because Morocco borrowed Mazen the amount of financing and tendered 100% of its project fully financed in order to control the cost of financing. So the industry was bidding on their project, but the money was actually lent to them at conditions which were similar for every bidder. So that was very, very creative and very departing from what the rest of the world is doing, in particular in the Gulf, and that's proved success. In terms of development of hydrogen, we're talking about huge amount, new technology risk, a lot of interface risk. And I think it's probably very legitimate to consider to have some guarantees in place to help the banks to be comfortable. And maybe that has been looked at for solar and PV, in particular in Sub-Saharan Africa. That has been looked at by a certain number of countries, that has been looked at by Europe, that has been looked at the World Bank. And there is still a project of that. For the time being, I think it's fair that because we've not solved the problem, the development of solar is much less than what it should be in Sub-Saharan Africa because of this lack of guarantee. So I think Germany and Morocco really could consider to create together a pilot guarantee fund in order to counter guarantee a certain number of hydrogen projects. The idea being that you may have a problem in one or in two, but you won't have a problem in all of them. So actually having a pot of fund counter-guaranteeing the development of a certain number of projects and issuing a guarantee to the benefit of the commercial bank is, in my view, probably something which needs to be explored, because that massively would help to scale up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lapierre, for those interesting insights and inputs. It's really very substantial what you are suggesting now. And what I have taken from this session, it's all about together and about team. Of course, my colleagues at Mazen have really achieved a very big innovation in terms of structuring and financing projects. But now it's time to get together with other actors, stakeholders, probably OCP, other stakeholders, private, together also with the German and European partners to build or to shape this regulatory framework in order to unleash funding and also the industry in development of Power-to-X projects. This is also a key element that was also mentioned in the speech of His Excellency Mr. Rabbah in the inauguration ceremony. And this is something that the National Commission of Green Hydrogen will also have to work on as a priority subject topic. Thank you very much to all of you, Mr. Bintabouche, Mr. El-Besha, Professor Dr. Ersheimer, Mrs. Lapierre, and also Mr. Delastour. And sorry, Selma, for being a bit late.
Thank you. Thank you all the speakers for this very insightful session of regulations and funding. Thank you, Dr. Samir, for your chairmanship. Just after the break lunch, we will resume at 2 p.m. With a scientific session. So I invite all PhD students and researchers to connect and take benefit from the presentations that will be given by esteemed experts in the field of Power-to-X. See you soon.